Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're jumping into a really fascinating topic, the incredibly rich, really ancient history of Bihar. It's a place often called the progenitor of Indian civilization.
Correct.
We've got this shared document, Bihar Ka Itihas, basically the history of Bihar. And our mission today is to, pull out the most important bits of knowledge. Everything from those grand ancient empires right through to key moments in India's freedom struggle.
Yeah, and progenitor isn't really an exaggeration here. Bihar's historical weight is foundational. What's really striking is how its history isn't just isolated events. It's a continuous story, constantly influencing the bigger picture of India. I mean, you look at its geography, those incredibly fertile Gangetic plains. That's where you got the conditions for the first big agricultural surpluses. And that, in turn, supported the first major cities, complex states. It really laid the groundwork.
That's a great way to put it, laid the groundwork.
Yeah.
So let's get into that foundational period. Our sources point straight to the Magadha Empire around 600 BCE as the epicenter. How did this ancient power become so central, really establishing Bihar as this cradle?
Right, around 600 BCE, Magadha, right there in Bihar, it just becomes this powerhouse. And it wasn't static. You see this succession of really powerful dynasties. You had the Haryankas starting things off, but then the Shishunaga and especially the Nanda dynasties, they really built up the power, the wealth, these huge armies. They basically created the strong state that Chandragupta Maurya then took over and expanded massively into the Mauryan Empire. That kind of continuous strong rule in one place was pretty unique back then.
Okay, and the Mauryan Empire, that's where things really scale up, right? Founded by Chandragupta Maurya, ruling from about 321 to 185 BCE. And its capital, Pataliputra, which is modern-day Patna, was key. What made it so vital for such a huge empire?
Well, Pataliputra's location was perfect. It's where several big rivers meet, including the Ganga. So it was a natural hub for trade, for logistics. Its strategic position was just unmatched. It let the Mauryans control vast areas through pretty effective administration and communication lines. And, this empire was a real turning point in Indian history. Its size, its centralized control, totally unprecedented. It kind of showed how you could unify this vast subcontinent.
And when you talk Mauryans, you have to talk Emperor Ashoka. His reign seems absolutely monumental, especially his role in spreading Buddhism. How did he manage to take what was more of a regional faith and make it so widespread?
Ashoka. Well, his conversion after the Kalinga War, that was everything, a huge pivot. See, unlike earlier rulers focused on conquest, Ashoka shifted gears. He focused on spreading a moral philosophy, Dhamma. He basically showed how a powerful state could actively sponsor and, spread a moral idea across a massive territory. He used edicts, missionaries. It fundamentally changed the state-religion relationship. He wasn't just a supporter of Buddhism, he became its biggest promoter, turning it from this local sect into something pan-Asian, eventually global. And it all started right there in Bihar.
That leads us perfectly into Bihar's wider religious significance. It wasn't just Ashoka. Our sources call it the land of Lord Buddha's penance. He reached enlightenment in Bodh Gaya. But also, Mahavir, the 24th Tirthankara of Jainism, was born there too. This place really was a crucible for two major world religions.
It's pretty extraordinary, isn't it? And beyond birthing these huge spiritual movements, Bihar also became this global intellectual hub. Think Nalanda, think Vikramshila universities. These weren't just local schools. They were drawing student scholars from all over Asia, China, Korea, Japan, Tibet. Massive places like monastic universities teaching philosophy, medicine, maths, astronomy, arts. They cemented Bihar's role not just as a spiritual center, but as the world's leading intellectual hub for centuries. Just try to imagine the buzz, the intellectual energy there.
Okay, so after those glory days, Mauryans, and later the Guptas, how does Bihar transition? Moving into the medieval era, what happens when these huge ancient empires start to decline?
Right. Well, after the Guptas declined, Bihar definitely went through periods where rule was more fragmented. You move away from that highly centralized empire model. It becomes more of a patchwork, politically speaking. Several smaller kingdoms pop up. But it's important to remember, even then, significant regional powers emerged, like the Pala Empire. They actually continued to support Buddhism, kept Nalanda going, and then this fragmentation eventually opened the door for larger external powers, primarily the Delhi Sultanate and then later the Mughal Empire. They really reshaped the political map.
But even with these shifts, new rulers coming in, the sources emphasize Bihar stayed important culturally and religiously. It wasn't just passively accepting rule, was it?
Oh, absolutely not. Despite all the political changes, Bihar's cultural dynamism just kept going. Take the Bhakti and Sufi movements, for example. They found really fertile ground there. These were popular movements focused on personal devotion rather than rigid rituals. They attracted people from all walks of life, and their influence just added another layer to Bihar's already rich cultural and spiritual life. It shows this continuous thread of resilience, of adaptation, not just being swallowed up by bigger empires.
Okay, let's shift now to the colonial period. The British arrive, establish control after the Battle of Buxar in 1764. How did that change things for Bihar, especially thinking about India's wider freedom struggle?
Well, Bihar played a really crucial and maybe sometimes overlooked role in the independence movement. Even under British administration, the region became a real hotbed for nationalist activities, for resistance. It showed that enduring spirit of, defiance and wanting self-rule.
And a prime example of that, a huge turning point, has to be Gandhi's Champaran Satyagraha in 1917. This whole movement championing farmers against those oppressive indigo planting rules. It wasn't just local, was it? It really marked a new phase in the entire independence movement. People often say it was Gandhi's first big success with Satyagraha in India.
Exactly. And it's interesting, even the British recognize Bihar's unique character to some extent. Administratively, in 1912, they separated Bihar from Bengal. It became its own province. That move itself kind of underlines that Bihar had its own distinct history, its own culture. It wasn't just an appendage of Bengal.
So fast forward past independence. India becomes independent, and Bihar is established as an eastern state in 1950. Our sources mention challenges. What was that post-independence period like?
Yeah, like many regions after independence, Bihar faced some pretty significant socioeconomic hurdles. The huge task of nation building, right? Tackling poverty, issues around literacy, agricultural development, all while trying to figure out how best to use its considerable natural resources. It was a complex time.
But despite those big challenges, it is striking how Bihar held on to its rich cultural heritage. And it continued to be a major player in national politics. That identity stayed strong.
Absolutely. What's really remarkable about Bihar is its continuous contribution, right through all the changes, to Indian politics, education, culture, even facing those challenges. It's a testament to its resilience, its legacy. I mean, think about it. India's first president, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, came from Bihar, and countless civil servants, academics, artists over the years. Bihar's influence has been consistently felt.
Wow. What an incredible sweep of history we've covered. From being the progenitor of Indian civilization in ancient times, through massive empires, global religions taking shape, colonial resistance, and its modern journey. Bihar's story really does seem intertwined with the core story of India itself.
It really does.
Yeah.
And, it makes you think, how do all these deep historical layers, the empires, the spiritual shifts, the freedom struggles, how do they keep shaping a region's identity today? How do they continue to influence the wider national narrative? Maybe the question for us and for you listening is, what can Bihar's long, enduring legacy teach us? What can it teach us about resilience, about how culture keeps evolving, and about that complex dance between deep history and present-day challenges?